I'm Tim Dixon, and I'm from Purpose. Would like to welcome you very warmly to our panel discussion this morning. As you know, Syria is, today in particular, very much on the front page. Our purpose for the session this morning is to, in a sense, go beyond that front page and talk about the real experience and the real lives of Syrians, what's going on inside Syria today. We're really delighted to have such a terrific panel, and Lara, our chair for this morning, will be introducing our guests in a few moments. But just to give you a little bit of context for the work of the Syria campaign, we'll show a video of that in a moment. But just to give you a little context, this initiative for the Syria campaign began earlier this year. It's part of the work of Purpose to focus on how we can use digital platforms to mobilise new constituencies around some of the toughest issues in the world. And when we look across the landscape of different issues, the crisis in Syria, as the UN has described, the greatest humanitarian catastrophe of our time. And yet a crisis where public engagement around the world is so weak. So our work has been to tell the powerful real stories of the human stories of Syrians, what's happening in their country, to mobilise concern and action around the world for Syrians around the themes of humanitarian aid, humanitarian access, refugee resettlement, the peace process, and the protection of civilians from the effect of indiscriminate explosive weapons. I want to just show, for those who haven't seen it, the video that was just launched last week, which is currently a focus of our campaign with the larger coalition, the With Syria coalition of more than 100 humanitarian human rights organisations around the world. We're trying to push strongly on that issue this week for action from the UN Security Council to make the impact on civilians a focus of the political process. So we'll just show you that, and then I'll introduce our chair.
Shadows settle on the place that you left. Our minds are troubled by the emptiness. Destroy the middle, it's a waste of time. From the perfect start to the finish line. And if you're still breathing, you're the lucky ones. 'Cause most of us are heaving through corrupted lungs, setting fire to our insides for fun, collecting names of the lovers that went wrong, the lovers that went wrong. You caused it, and you caused it.
It's in connection with the work that we've been doing on civilian protection that we came across the Syrian Civil Defence Force, the White Helmets, and we've found the story of the work that the White Helmets are doing in Syria, breaking across all of the sectarian lines, showing a very different story to the one that we're seeing on the front pages every day. The powerful, heroic stories of ordinary civilians reaching out to simply save the lives of others. It's some of the most powerful stuff that we've ever dealt with. And I know I was down in southern Turkey just a few weeks ago, seeing how they train in 100, 105, 110 degree heat, and getting just the smallest taste of the experience of the 24-hour shifts they work in to pull people out from under the rubble after the barrel bombs have dropped, to save the lives of thousands of people now, as they've done. And so we've made that a very strong focus of our work to elevate the powerful stories of what the White Helmets are doing. And it's been fantastic in the last few weeks to see the strength of the response. And it's a huge privilege for us this week to have our friends from the White Helmets here with us. So really looking forward to hearing from them this morning. But let me introduce to you Lara Setrakin, our chair for the panel this morning. Lara is an acclaimed journalist, reporter, and entrepreneur. She's had several years of work, deep expertise in the Middle East from the time of her coverage of the revolution in Iran in 2009. And she's worked for several outlets, ABC, Bloomberg, and then is the founder of Syria Deeply, which has been a fantastic new media intervention that has helped people to get a much better understanding of the real stories of what's going on in Syria today. So let me introduce to you Lara to introduce the panel. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Tim. I am so honored to be leading this conversation today, and I really do so as a stand-in. I'm a stand-in for Jim Foley, for Stephen Sahloul, for Marie Colvin, for Anthony Shadid, and for more than 70 journalists who've died covering the conflict in Syria. The majority of them were Syrian reporters. And they died covering Syria. They risked their lives to talk to people like Raed and Farouk, who we get to hear from today in Midtown Manhattan. And they did it because they knew that Syria was a story we could not miss, that it would only get worse in Syria if we didn't pay attention. And unfortunately, they were right. If 22 million Syrian people weren't reason enough to pay attention to what's happening, the basic fact of this week is that now Syria's story is everyone's story. Since we have launched strikes, the US has launched strikes in coordination with its partners on targets in Syria, we've effectively kicked the hornet's nest. We don't know what will come at us next, and we don't know where it will lead people on the ground. There's a lot that we're not hearing. There are the consequences, the human consequences of the past week that we're just starting to understand. So with that, I have the privilege of introducing our panelists, all four of whom have done tremendous work over the course of the past 3.5 years, working the problem. They are the ones working the problem when we're looking in another direction. I'm going to start with Peggy Hicks, who is the Global Advocacy Director of Human Rights Watch. She represents an organization that has done tremendous things in documenting the civilian consequences, the human rights abuses that have taken place from all sides in Syria. She and her colleagues have done an incredible job from around the world, inside Syria and out, documenting the conflict as it's unfolded. So Peggy, tell us a little bit about what you do, what you have chronicled over the past 3.5 years.
Thanks very much, Lara, and I'm very privileged to be here, and thanks to the Syria Campaign and Purpose for organizing this event. We, as you've said, I too am a stand-in for an amazing team of researchers who engage in the Syria situation in a very deep way. That to them is a challenge as well, given the security and other constraints on our work. But through that, we've been able to really investigate and report on and try to bring to light the ongoing story of what is happening day to day in Syria. And what I'd like to do is give a little insight into one piece of that work, which is the work that we've been doing to really report on and to somehow reduce or bring an end to indiscriminate attacks on civilian populations. And through this work, what we focused on is the ability to bring together both satellite imagery, the video testimony that you can all access on YouTube, but then our independent research techniques of going to the source, talking to the people involved, collaborating, corroborating all these stories, and coming to definitive evidence, really, of the ongoing campaign of barrel bomb attacks. So I've got a couple of slides that I'd like to show that give a sense.
Peggy, tell us, what is a barrel bomb?
Sure. Actually, I think I even have a slide that will help us do that, if I can get this to work. So I first want to start off by just saying that barrel bombs, we talk a lot about barrel bombs, and they are important because it's an improvised weapon. It can be almost anything. It's just a term of reference to talk about something that's created using sometimes, the sort of chemical barrels that you see, but it can be filled with explosive devices that make it basically almost impossible to control how it will impact. All we know is that it will kill, and it's often dropped from such a height that there's no way to ensure that it's going to fall on a particular target. So it is almost by nature an indiscriminate weapon. But we wanted to point out as well that while we talk about barrel bombs, there are other types of explosive weapons that are being used in populated areas. So it's not just barrel bombs, it's cluster weapons, it's landmines, it is the use of incendiary devices. So it's a full range of devices that are being used in Syria. Oops. It does not want to do what it's supposed to do. Next. Yes. There we go. Okay, so these barrel bombs, because they can be created in Syria, it's almost an inexhaustible source. You can't cut off the ability to create these barrel bombs. They're going to be able to create, thousands and thousands of them. The only thing you might be able to do to stop the use of them is either to get the Syrian government and armed groups that use some of these tactics to see that these are violations of international law and to say we won't engage in these types of attacks, or potentially to stop the delivery mechanism, which is the helicopters and planes that can be used to drop them. And those do have a limited supply and are resupplied by parts and other devices.
Let's pull back the narrative while you're going to get into it here.
It did it, but
it's all right. Just to make sure the technology doesn't stop you from helping us understand this. So basically, and you've documented abuses on all sides of the conflict. But in this thing that you're pointing us to, this is the Syrian government, President Bashar al-Assad, his government has the planes flying over civilian areas, dropping these barrel bombs, which can be stuffed with scrap metal and TNT, on civilian neighborhoods. Why? Why? What's the...
Well, motivation's always a very good question. And I think part of what the slideshow that we'll look at shows is that unlike in a regular military campaign where you use a weapon along the lines of conflict, what we see and what the satellite imagery shows through these barrel bomb attacks is that they've moved away from the lines of conflict, the disputed areas, and moved over to whole civilian neighborhoods. So when you're doing a campaign across a civilian neighborhood, I can't definitively tell you what the motivation is, but we can all guess. If you're targeting in a broad way a civilian neighborhood, you are doing it for reasons that you want that population to move. You want to terrorize that population. You want to force them out as a tactic of the conflict. There's really no other way to read these types of attacks because they're simply not targeted enough to be used in a more traditional military fashion against specific military targets. So what we've seen then is, and this, if we can get this to actually work, what you see then is this is a type of imagery that we're able to access of satellites. So this is a pre-strike satellite image, and then you go on to, this is what it looks like. And there's a very scalloped signature to these attacks. So we can look at these, we can find them. And what's important to know is that just with the satellite imagery that we've used over Aleppo, and that's not the only place where barrel bombs are being used, we've been able to record 650 of these types of impacts in these residential areas since the Security Council in February of this year demanded an end to these attacks. And that's basically, for me, the bottom line, that this isn't a technique that can be hidden. We've got the definitive evidence of it happening, and we can show you this is the time series analysis that I talked about of how this is the front lines are along here. This is where they used to be happening from November until mid-2012 to October 31st, 2013. They were sort of along the areas you would expect in terms of the impacts. And then what happens is they start to move into the areas of, I wish I could get this to work better. Okay, so you can see how they've moved away from the front lines and into the area of the civilian neighborhoods here. And that pattern just continues and continues. So yeah, sorry, go back to that one if I can. Okay, this is not working that well. Sorry, I don't like the tech to interfere. Okay, so we'll ignore this. So what the pattern shows is that move from the main areas to the other area. And yeah, that just is not good.
Okay.
Then the other slides, just so you're not left hanging about what we also tried to document, is that we've also been able to document the chlorine attacks and the ability of, you can also use the same sort of makeshift weapons made with chlorine, which is not in and of itself a restricted substance, but it can be used as part of a chemical attack as well. And so we've also been able to document chlorine attacks since the Security Council resolution. And so what we've focused on is the need to end all those attacks.
So you've seen barrel bombs, and they've not stopped with what we're hearing now in the news cycle. You've seen chemical, and we've seen now verification from the UN that chemicals, chlorine, have been used in the past year since the whole media kerfuffle around the one attack in eastern Ghouta, which is that there's this repetition of this. How much harder does it get now to verify? How much worse can it be now that there's also this ISIS factor and strikes factor? I mean, what is this space going to look like? What's going to happen?
Okay. The ability to document what's going on in Syria is a huge challenge for organizations that are working there because the security conditions are now, we used to be able to go into Aleppo and interview people. We don't do that at this stage because we simply cannot do that and meet the security concerns that our organization has. That doesn't mean we don't research. We still do, but it's diminished dramatically. The other factor, which is, it's impossible for me to even believe, but we're having trouble now getting satellite imagery because the satellites have been redirected and are now taking pictures of Iraq instead. And so everybody's looking at Iraq, and it's hard to get the satellite imagery that we were getting on Syria. So I don't have updated data, for example, from the end of July until now, because a lot of the same satellites that we were using to get the satellite data for Syria aren't available now. And I think that's sort of indicative of the media environment and the political environment in which we work, where there's this diversion of attention in a way that makes it all the more difficult to get people to focus on the indiscriminate attacks in Syria.
Thank you so much. I want to hear from Dr. Zaher. Maybe move you back to the middle while you, and I'll introduce you in the meantime while you migrate.
I'm fine.
I want to middle. You should. People deserve a good frontal view. Dr. Zaher is the president of the Syrian American Medical Society. He is an incredible human. He is a doctor, an intensive care specialist. He leads the Syrian American Medical Society, but what you can't really see in his bio is that he's led teams, individual doctors from the United States going into Syria for years now, 3.5 years, leading expeditions to provide emergency care, basic care, health services that have essentially broken down in areas across the country. I often think that groups like SAMS, frankly, have done a better job covering and reporting on the conflict than most news organizations. You guys have been there. Hello. And I think there's something very powerful to that. So he's going to share a bit of the experience of the Syrian American Medical Society and his own perspective on what's happened. Tell us about it.
Thank you, Lara, for this introduction, nice introduction. And you've mentioned that SAMS has been doing heroic work. I believe what we are doing and what Raed and Farouk is doing is just our duty. I happen to be Syrian American. I immigrated to this country 24 years ago. I have family inside Syria. I'm a physician who was trained inside Syria, so this is the time that we have the largest scale crisis in our homeland, and if we're not doing this work, who will be doing it? So I don't believe that what we are doing is heroic. I'm privileged to be with Raed and Farouk. These are the real heroes, and the real heroes are in the picture behind me also. These are the doctors and the nurses in Aleppo who are still working there, knowing that at any minute they can be killed by a barrel bomb that Peggy has been talking about. And this is a picture I took in my last mission in Aleppo. It's in a hospital in Al-Sahloul area, and I was looking at the map that you presented of Aleppo. Al-Sahloul area is one of those neighborhoods that is away from the front lines, but is being bombed every day. This hospital that you're seeing right now, this is the operating room, has bombed 5 times, the last time with a guided missile. So we know who is the culprit. The neighborhood which the hospital is in told us, please do not rebuild the hospital in this area anymore because we don't want to be bombed. So imagine that you have civilian population that are in need for health care, and there is no access to health care. There is shortage of medical supplies and medications. People are dying because of chronic diseases, and this is not reported at all. People die in Syria because they have heart attack in the middle of the night and they cannot go to the hospital, or they have appendicitis and they cannot find a surgeon, or someone who has complication during delivery and she cannot find an OB-GYN. And in spite of that, they are telling us, don't build the hospital, rebuild the hospital because we don't want to be bombed. So I'm going to show you some pictures from that most of them I took myself and my colleague. This is a field hospital in northern Latakia. Because of this systematic targeting of hospitals in Syria, and you may ask yourself, I mean, why is that? I mean, why is the government targeting hospitals, or these armed groups are targeting the hospitals? And we know that 150 years ago, the international community have agreed that in the time of conflict, in the time of war, doctors and nurses should be allowed to treat the patients regardless of their affiliations. Even if they belong or happen to belong to your enemy, you're supposed to allow the ambulances and the doctor to treat the wounded. But we're talking here about treating civilians in areas that happen to be in the middle of the conflict, trapped civilians. So because of this targeting of healthcare facilities, doctors in Syria started to build hospitals in the basements, in deserted buildings, in farm houses, and sometimes in basements of a church or a mosque. And this is one of the basements of a building in northern Latakia. And I took this picture myself. Unfortunately, this hospital also has been bombed. This is an emergency room in the hospital that I showed you the picture first. So you go to the emergency room as a patient and you expect to see defibrillator and IV fluid and ambu bag and oxygen, but you don't expect to see the sandbags. And clearly, this was done for the protection of the patients and the facilities, because this hospital in the neighborhood is bombed with barrel bombs on a daily basis. This is the impact of a barrel bomb on that hospital. This is something that you see on a daily basis in Aleppo and Idlib and other areas in Syria, where you see people pointing to the sky, and I've seen that myself. And then you look at the sky and this small dot on the sky, which is the helicopter, and you hear the sounds in distance. Then this helicopter will throw another dot, and this dot will become bigger and bigger and bigger. Then it will explode, and that site of explosion could be a bakery, could be a school, could be a building where your family live, could be a hospital. And the only thing that you can do as a civilian in Aleppo when you see that is to pray that this will not hit you and run. You have usually 20 seconds from the time of the throwing of the barrel bomb. This happened 30 to 50 times every day. And you imagine the population in these areas that are hit with the barrel bombs. I've been in Aleppo 3 times. The last time in May of last year, 75% of the neighborhoods that I've visited before were empty. So when we're talking about Masakin Hanano and Al-Sha'ar and Al-Sahloul, these areas in Aleppo being hit every day in a barrel bomb, you know what's the reason of the tactic, and it's very successful actually. 75% or more of people now left Aleppo to either Turkey, became refugees, or other sides of Syria where they are internally displaced people. And these are the victims who are basically the captive audience for messages of ISIL and Nusra and other extremist groups because they have nothing else to look for. They lost hope, they lost their homes, they lost their salaries, they lost their family members, many of them have been tortured, and they feel that the international community have left them. This is happening in Syria for the past 3.5 years. Now we are paying more attention to Syria because of ISIL, but this is happening in Syria on a daily basis, and people expected the United States and the international community to come to their assistance because there is a responsibility for the United Nations to protect civilians in the time of conflict, but that did not happen a year ago when we have 1,600 people gassed to death while they are asleep. I was on Al Jazeera America last night, and they asked me, what happened since last year when we had the town hall meeting following the massacre in Al-Ghouta? I said, well, since last year, we lost an additional 90,000 people in Syria, 90,000 people. An additional 1 million refugees became refugees, and an additional 2 million people became internally displaced only. So we're talking about a huge scale of crisis. You know, I visited last week the 9/11 memorial here. In Syria, every 2 weeks we have 9/11. If you look at the number of people who have died in the last 3.5 years, and Syria is a small country, 22 million people only. Every 2 weeks we have a 9/11 in Syria. This is the impact of a barrel bomb. I took this picture of myself. Of course, ambulances also are victims of barrel bombs. 75% of ambulances have been damaged, according to the World Health Organization. Dr. Hassan is a successful British-trained surgeon, used to be a professor in Aleppo University. He oversees the care in eastern Aleppo of 10 hospitals. And this is him inspecting one of the hospitals that was damaged by a barrel bomb. I took the picture myself. And do you know what his main concern was at that time? His main concern was he was trying to salvage some of the medical supplies and equipment so he can use it for treating the next patient. So this is, to Dr. Hassan and his colleagues, this is happening on a daily basis. Okay, so another barrel bomb, another hospital has been destroyed. Let's evacuate the patient and try to salvage as much as we can because there's a shortage of medical supplies. It's a very limited access to Aleppo because it's under siege by ISIL on one side and the regime on the other side. When we talk about a barrel bomb, it's a huge bomb. It's a barrel stuffed with 300 to 500 kilograms of TNT. So we're not talking about a bomb that will create only a hole in the ground, gonna level a whole block of building like this. Look at the desperation in the face of this doctor in one of the hospitals in Aleppo. You know, this is an impact of a barrel bomb. He's ambu-bagging one of the patients on the floor. And, you know, I took the picture myself, and then I was looking at it. And, you know, this is what people in Aleppo, doctors and nurses, have every day. I mean, they look like they're desperate. Most of them have post-traumatic stress disorder. Each one of us who is familiar with what's happening in Syria, including the three of us here, have probably some psychiatric trauma, including those first responders. Just going back to this picture, if I can go back. All right, anyway. So the Syrian government, and unfortunately, have tried any way to invent new ways to killing its own people. So one time it's barrel bomb, one time it's cluster bombs, one time it's snipers, and one time it's chemical weapons. And these pictures were taken also in Aleppo and also in northern Latakia. There's instruction to the population what to do when you have a chemical weapon exposure. So you have a developing country who has very limited resources, and now they have to deal with chemical weapon. And as you have mentioned, chlorine gas have been used also in Syria in the last few months after the treaty that Syria got rid of its declared chemical weapon. Chlorine gas is not one of the agents that is mentioned in the treaty, but it can kill people. And we've seen also reports, and we documented reports of patients dying and civilian dying because of exposure to chlorine gas. Starvation is used in Syria to kill people also. This is from Al-Ghouta. Al-Ghouta is just 10 minutes driving from Damascus, where most of the UN agencies and ICRC offices are. But they are not allowed to go to Al-Ghouta to give food and baby milk to the population. There are 800,000 people in Al-Ghouta. This is one child dying because of starvation. just 10 minutes away from most of the international community agencies are. And so this is another reinvented way in killing people. And of course, when we hear sometimes about the Syrian government having local truces with the opposition, this is how truces work. So the Syrian government have siege on populated areas where you have the opposition and of course the local population. And then people die because of starvation and typhoid and epidemic. Then eventually the opposition will surrender and the Syrian government will declare victory and success for the truces. This is what happened in Homs, in my city, and this is what's happening right now in Al-Ghouta. Of course, when we're talking about the impact of these barrel bombs and sniping, most of the victims are civilians. Many reports have documented the death of 17,000 children since the beginning of the crisis, 17,000 children. These are some of the children who actually survived one of the barrel bomb attack. This child did not survive. This child survived. I wrote 3 articles. If you're interested, I think that will give you an idea about the impact of what's happening in Syria on the local population, especially from the medical perspective. This is one of them. It's called the Corridor of Death, Ma'bar al-Maut, which is an area where it separates between the area controlled by the government and the area outside of the control of the government. And civilians have to pass from area to area, and you have snipers on the roof shooting at people. So this is one article. The other article is about the impact of barrel bombing on hospitals and medical care. It's called, This is Not a Horror Story. This is a public hospital in Aleppo. And the third article is about the chemical weapon attack 1 year ago. It's called When Doctors Play God. Because what's happening in these areas where you have hospitals with very limited supplies, doctors have to choose which patient they have to save. They cannot save everyone, so they have to select which patient they can save with the very limited supplies. There's always success stories. This is one of the inventors in Aleppo. You have snipers shooting at you, and you cannot go. Our friends here cannot go and save these patients who are bleeding to death on the street. So they invented this machine, Robotina, to try to salvage these patients who are bleeding without getting sniped at. Syria is not very developing. Actually, I believe that Syria has very vibrant civil society. You have very creative people in Syria. We have very diverse and influential diaspora in many countries. And I think after this crisis ends, hopefully, you will see that all of them will merge together, hopefully, to rebuild Syria the way that it was, and maybe even better. But we have many talents in Syria that are waiting for their time to rebuild and implant hope in the population. This is what we do to help our colleagues from distance. This is called eICU, electronic ICU. So we can monitor patients inside Syria from United States. So if we can look at my computer, for example, I can look at these patients in Aleppo or Idlib or northern Latakia. We have a camera. We have a satellite internet. And we can, in the camera, move it to look at the patient, look at the monitors, look at the ventilator and the vital signs, and communicate with the physician there via Skype and tell him what to do. We do that here also in rural areas in the United States, but we can do it also with Syria, eICU. Impact of a barrel bomb on neighborhoods in Aleppo. Aleppo is the most populated city in Syria, by the way. Before the crisis has 5 million people. Right now, probably less than 2 million people live there. Dr. Hassan will be visiting the United States in the next couple of weeks, so hopefully he will have a chance to connect with some of you. He's one of the heroes. These are the real heroes in Syria, not us, and I hope that we recognize that. They work every day expecting that. They don't expect anything. They may die anytime, but they believe that this is their duty. You've seen, some of you, Grey Anatomy, right? They had an episode about Syria where you had a Syrian physician coming to get some training on how to treat disasters, how to manage the disasters and trauma. And then in that clip, they tell him, okay, we're not going to have surgical sets for you. Then he turns the light off. You tell them right now, this is the way that we deal with the situation in Syria. There's no light. There's no electricity. And this is a way to overcome this problem. This is lithium battery that Dr. Hassan carries all the time with him. You've seen him in the pictures carrying a bag. This is a lithium battery. And when there is a bombing or shelling, He has this light on his head. It's connected to the battery. So when there's no electricity, he can perform operations with this light. That battery will last for 6 hours. This is Abdullah, who had shrapnels because of barrel bomb, 12 years old. He was playing in the neighborhood in Aleppo. His life was saved because of these doctors who were trained by my organization, Syrian Medical Society. This hospital was built by SAMS and supported by SAMS with medical supplies and training, and even we paid the salaries to the patients. Unfortunately, it's bombed right now. This is the largest medical center in northern Syria, Al-Kindi Medical Center. It cost the Syrian people $300 million. That's the same center right now. Thank you very much.
Raed Saleh and Farouk Al-Habib are joining us today from in and around Syria. They represent the civil defense forces, what the Syria campaign has come to introduce as the white helmets. We often heard over the past 3.5 years of covering the conflict, who are the good guys in Syria? It's such a mess. They are the good guys. Dr. Hassan is the good guys. We're going to see a little bit about their work in a short clip and then hear from them about what it takes to do the work they do.
في أحد الأيام تعرضت منطقة الأنصاري لقصف بالبراميل المتفجرة. حصلنا نطالع العائلة الأولى والعائلة الثانية. العائلة الثالثة هي الأم والولد. هي فعلاً يعني الأم كانت كثير منفعلة. عندها كثير كانت عصبية وكانت عم تصيح، يعني هي خايفة على حالها أو خايفة على ابنها. بعد الحفل الطويل حصلنا نسمع صوت الولد، صوت صار يبكي الولد، حصلنا نسمع صوته وكان كثير محل صعب. بعد ما وصلنا لولد هون صار الشغل كثير بده حذر، يعني هذا ولد عمره أسبوعين أو أكثر، بأي لحظة بيطب شي فوقه أو بيموت أو بيختنق. هلا 12 ساعة طبعاً هي ما يمكن تنقاد، يعني عمل كثير حذر، يعني هي روح بدك تتعامل معها بشكل خطير جداً. يعني إنه طفل عمره أسبوعين يطب فوقه برميل أو 3 سقوف ما يستووا شيء، يعني وكل هالضغوطات إنه هذا الطفل يطلع أقوى من البراميل وأقوى من السقوف وأقوى من كل شيء.
هذا إعجازه يا رب يا الله تبارك اسمك. أمه وينه؟ عدل أمك المال. الله شوي شوي خالد عليك يا خالد. الله يا الله يا هو ثواني أبوسك ثواني عافية عافية.
زرتوا الولد بعد ما انقذتوه؟
ما عندنا وقت، قالوا له قصف قصف قصف.
So sorry. I can't hold back and I won't. A lot of babies don't make it. That was the miracle baby. I just can't believe that I can't hold it together when I watch that video. And Farouk and Raed can be here to tell us about it. And they are stronger than us. They are just stronger than us. So let me start with Farouk. Just, you know, you see that you see that a lot. But when you watch that video, obviously you knew of that baby's story before we ever got to see it. So, you know, how do you react when you see that? I mean, what do you want to share with us about that?
Unfortunately, just only few cases are documented and we can get photos and videos for them to let the world see about them. But as a matter of fact, there are so many cases which are not documented. This is one maybe of the success stories. And as a matter of fact, because of the continuous shelling and because of the lack of equipment, there are so many other cases where the civil defense heroes sometimes fail to rescue people from under the rubbles. Khalid, the baby rescuer who you have seen in the video, was supposed to come with us. And he was supposed to fly on Monday, but unfortunately, because he didn't have passport, we couldn't finish the legal arrangements in Turkey. But he has just came, and now he's supposed to be in the airport. I'm sorry that he couldn't attend this event with us now, but we may try to arrange another event for him. I'm originally from Homs, and I'm one of the Syrian activists who participated in the peaceful revolution in Homs. Then I came out of Syria almost a year ago, and I couldn't come back because of the siege around my city. Then based from Turkey, I managed a project funded by the Western donors to provide support, training and equipment for those heroes, for the civil defense teams who are working inside Syria. Raed represents those teams now here. He is the head of the Idlib civil defense organization, and he can give you some more details about how those teams are formed, what are the difficulties they face, and why do they do this work.
طبعا أنا رائد صالح من سوريا من محافظة إدلب. نحن بالدفاع بلشنا بالعمل الثوري تقريبا من بداية الثورة من 2011 وحاولنا نساعد الناس بالمخيمات السورية بتركيا.
Raed is originally from Idlib, actually from Jisr al-Shughur village. He joined also the peaceful movement in Syria in 2011, and then he joined the relief workers to provide assistance to the refugees in his area.
2012 مع بداية تحرر بعض المناطق بسوريا من النظام السوري نزلنا على سوريا وبلشنا بالعمل بإغاثة الناس النازحين من مناطق سيطرة النظام للحدود السوري التركي.
In 2012, and after the liberation of some areas in the north of Syria, he worked with other volunteers to help the IDPs, the internal displaced people in the north of Syria.
وهون ب 2012 بلشت تتوسع المناطق اللي خارجة عن سيطرة النظام وبلش تزيد معاناة الناس من حيث عمليات القصف المستمرة بالبراميل والصواريخ الفراغية وكافة أنواع القصف المستمر بشكل يومي.
The suffering of the people increased because of the continuous shelling, and noticing at the same time that there were no public institutions to provide services for those people.
تم اختيار مجموعة من الشباب للذهاب إلى تركيا وإجراء دورة تدريبية على عمليات البحث والإنقاذ.
At that time, a group of volunteers were chosen to go to Turkey to get training on search and rescue missions.
هذا الكلام قام 23/6/2013.
That was in 23rd of June 2013.
ورحنا 25 شخص 20 شاب و5 صبايا للتدريب في اسطنبول.
We were 25 volunteers, 20 men and 5 women. We went to Turkey to get training on how to rescue people from Adaba.
واخذنا على عاتقنا امانه انه اي شخص راح يموت بعدها تحت الانقاض راح يكون برقبتنا.
And we made a commitment that from that date anyone who is stuck under rubble and may die is our responsibility. We have to rescue him.
وبعد عودتنا الى سوريا ب1/7/2013 افتتحنا اول مركز دفاع مدني بقريه اليعقوبي بريف جسر الشغور.
We came back to Syria in July 2013 and we opened the first civil defense center in Al Yaqubiyya village.
بس شفنا انه مركز واحد غير قادر يغطي كافة محافظة ادلب، وبلشنا نشتغل على تدريب بمناطق تانية ولافتتاح مراكز جديدة. انتقلنا لبنش وثم معرة النعمان، بلشنا نتوسع بكل محافظة ادلب حتى وصلنا اليوم 17 مركز بيغطوا محافظة ادلب بشكل كامل.
Of course, one center was not enough to help the people there, and we started training others and opening other centers gradually, and now we have almost 17 civil defense centers in Idlib governorate, and I can tell you that in Aleppo governorate also there are other 17 civil defense centers.
ونحن اليوم 17 مركز بإدلب، 17 مركز بحلب، 9 مراكز بحما و6 مراكز باللاذقية.
Now there are also 9 centers in Hama and 6 in Latakia.
وهلا حاليا اخر مشروع كان لنا هو انشاء 3 مراكز تدريب في سوريا لتدريب المتطوعين الجدد على عمليات البحث والانقاذ تحت المباني المدمرة.
And our last project was to establish 3 training centers inside Syria to be able to train others and open new centers and train volunteers on how to rescue people from under rubble.
طبعا نحن مجموعة من الشباب من كافة الشرائح المجتمع السوري، نحن أطباء مهندسين وطلاب جامعات ونجارين باطون وخياطين وتجار كنا سابق قبل الثورة، وكلاتنا انخرطنا ضمن العمل في الدفاع المدني وشكلنا فريق واحد عم يشتغل على كافة الأراضي السورية تحت شعار هو ومن أحياها فكأنما أحيا الناس جميعا.
We are a group of volunteers from different backgrounds. We have doctors, engineers, merchants, workers from all backgrounds working together for one cause and under one slogan that a man who rescue one life as if rescued lives of everybody.
طبعا أنا حزين هلا حاليا كثير يعني بسبب عدم وجود زميلي خالد معنا، وهو هلا جاي حاليا بالطيارة. كنت سعيد أكثر لو كان هو موجود يحكي عن هاي القصة اللي هو عاشها خلال 16 ساعة عمل.
I'm very sad that my colleague Khalid is not with us now. He was supposed to be here to speak about his personal experience, how he spent 16 hours working in the site there until he rescued that baby.
بس هاي قصة قدرنا نصورها، استطاعت الكاميرا التقاطها، ولكن هناك آلاف القصص اللي ما قدرت الكاميرا توثق هاي القصص.
We were able to document this story, but there were maybe other thousands of stories which were not documented.
لأن فرق الدفاع المدني في سوريا حتى 23/8/2014 استطاعت بالدراجات النارية اللي تمتلكها وبالمعدات البسيطة اللي موجودة بين دياتنا تنقذ 2514 شخص أحياء من تحت الأنقاض.
Till 23rd of August 2014, the civil defense teams in Syria, depending on very basic tools and materials and just motorcycles, they were able to rescue more than 2,514 Syrian lives.
نحن بفضل رب العالمين، بفضل جهد المتطوعين بالدفاع المدني، استطعنا نعيد نوع من الأمل للناس الموجودة داخل سوريا بأنه ممكن يجي ضوء في ظل العتمة الموجود تحت الأنقاض لتطلع روح جديدة.
Because depending on the support from God and from the good people around us, we are able now to give hope for those people who might be stuck under rubble. They feel they will have hope that there will be others who will come and try to rescue them.
نتأمل من باقي شعوب العالم أن تكون إيد وحدة لنوقف ضد طغاة العالم بكل العالم، لنحارب الإرهاب بكل العالم، لنكون نعيش ضمن روح وحدة إنسانية وحدة تجمع كل الشعوب في العالم.
We hope from the other people in the world to support us and help us to be acting as one hand, one soul against the dictators in the world for the best of the human beings.
شكرا.
Thank you so much. I have so many things I want to ask, but we have 8 minutes, 7 minutes. Time flies when you're getting real, when you're this real. And I promised that we'd open up for questions. We have 7 minutes. Wow. Please keep the questions short, introduce yourself, and allow them the maximum time.
This is Shannon Martin from the New York Times. I've been covering the conflict along the border since basically it started, and witnessed things that basically nothing comparable to you guys, but in reflection of the situation inside them. So, but one thing that I would like to focus on is that there's a lot of medical aid that was coming to the border, going inside, but as soon as it crossed the Turkish border, very few people knew where it was heading yet, because there are a lot of checkpoints, a lot of different groups, and I wonder how that is functioning right now with an additional element of ISIS being added up to the equation.
Dr. Zaher might want to take a stab at that.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is easy because most of us who are working inside Syria, we learn and we have to document every details with pictures, with details and so forth, every piece of equipment or supply that we send inside Syria. So part of the requirement from our organization, SAMS, and other NGOs, that we have to have reports on where the medical supplies were sent, what are the numbers of patients that benefited from them, pictures, if possible, videos, and the reports from the doctors and the nurses who are using these medical equipment. So I think most of the NGOs who are doing cross-border relief can provide you with detailed report about where these supplies are going to. Now, with the presence of ISIL, that is creating new sets of challenges because it's for us, for example, we have a new policy right now that American expatriates should not go inside Syria, which is, makes a lot of sense with what's happening. I'm sure that there will be more sets of challenges on delivery of medical supplies to the population who are in need, even in the areas under ISIL. I mean, you cannot just keep these population starved to death, and there should be ways to deliver medical supplies and humanitarian aid to them.
Farouk, would you like to add anything, or are you satisfied with that answer?
I would like to add that the size and the volume of the catastrophe in Syria is very huge. So no matter how much aids are sent from outside, it will still very, very little, and it will not be enough to cover all the needs inside Syria.
Other questions? Great, I get to ask mine. I'm so sorry.
I'm just wondering, one of the most tragic faces of the conflict is obviously the faces of the children. My question is, how do you explain to the children that you do save and you're seeing on a daily basis what's going on? How can you help them kind of understand the situation? Because obviously that's a very difficult challenge you face.
نحن الأطفال اللي عم ننقذهم أكيد ما عندنا وقت لنشرح لهم بسبب سقوط البراميل المستمر بشكل يومي. يعني حتى نحن ما عندنا وقت لنشوف أطفالنا، يمكن أنا من شهرين ما شفت أطفالي. فنحن ما قادرين نشوف الأطفال حتى بعد ما ننقذهم أو حتى نزورهم في بيوتهم.
It's same. As a matter of fact, they don't have time even to sit with their own children. He haven't seen his 2 kids for 2 months. The barrels of bombs never stop every day, and this is the daily situation for everybody.
Can I say something?
Yes.
We have psychosocial programs, and other NGOs do, where most of these children are traumatized, like adults with what's happening. Most of them have witnessed family members being killed or their houses being destroyed. And most of the time when you talk to a child in Syria, they don't open up to you. They don't smile even. So we use art therapy to treat these children with trauma. So they initially start drawing pictures of blood and people dying and tanks and so forth. Then eventually, after a few days of this treatment, they start to draw pictures of rivers and skies and trees and so forth, and children smiling. So this is one way to deal with the situation, but I mean, we're just scratching the surface of this. I mean, the tragedy is that you have millions of people in Syria. Most of them are children who are traumatized, and there's no way to manage all the scale of injuries, psychiatric injuries. That will stay with you for the rest of your life.
بس بالفترة الأخيرة فيني أقول لك إنه صرنا نلاحظ الأطفال في القرى وبالمدن اللي إحنا عم نشتغل فيها بلشوا يتخلوا عن موضوع البارودة بإيده اللي يلعب فيها اللي هي عبارة كانت عن خشبة ليتحول ليشيل سيارة إسعاف ولا يحط على راسه طاسة ويشتغل دفاع مدني.
But we started noticing during the past period that the work of the civil defense started giving hope and some good stories for the children themselves. So in the past, the children in our areas used to play in weapons. They use wood materials as weapons and play with each other as Syrian army and Free Syrian army. But after the stories that they heard and witnessed about the civil defense, they started playing other games like civil defense teams rescuing other victims.
Last question.
My name is Amy Rosen. I have a question around how much are hospitals required to make arrangements with ISIL, FSA, and Nusra in order to exist? I'm aware, at least in an individual case, of a political prisoner going into a hospital trying to escape a Nusra group and was returned to that group. Is that how? Which leads me to this question. You know, is it just a fact that ISIL needs to be with these groups in order to be able to help people?
I mean, that's a very important question, but you know, as physicians, you're not supposed to ask people who are coming to your hospital where you're from and which party you belong to. I mean, I can tell you that in these hospitals, 90% of the patients treated are civilians, but of course you will have also people who belong to this armed group or that armed group. I'm not aware that ISIL is in Aleppo nowadays, used to be in the past. But I'm sure that you have fighters who were injured and coming to be treated in this hospital. As a physician, as a nurse, you have to treat them the way you treat other patients and don't, you know, get involved in their political affiliation. I can tell you that our hospitals are harassed by all parties, of course. I mean, and lately we've been getting more harassment from these fighting groups also, whether they belong to the Free Syrian Army or to al-Nusra or others. And it's becoming more and more challenging, but I mean, what else you can do?
Please join me in thanking our panelists for being with us today.